I'll speak a bit lower then. Okay. Look, when these two ladies first started the Johns campaign, it was like throwing a snowball off Mount Everest. Now that snowball must have hit a few rocks, but the snowballs kept rolling and is now turning into an avalanche. But we all have a duty to ensure that the landslide does not turn into lip service or into a tick box exercise. That's my biggest fear in the hospital. And I applaud Jeremy and the Alzheimer's Society for taking the action as soon as they learned about John's campaign. Because if people don't speak out about things like this, no one ever gets to know about it. I'm also pleased that you've recognised the importance of the carers' well-being, because I personally think that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb regarding stress. While having dementia is stressful and depressing for myself, I know it's 4 times worse for my wife and other people who are caring for people. So I applaud John's campaign and I wish it every success.
Thank you, Tommy. I don't know if anyone wants to reply to address that at all, or we should just say thank you for that and ask for more questions.
I am Tommy's wife, so I'm his carer, and I'm very proud of what he's doing. But what Alistair said about the hospitals with the stickers, like the butterfly, we do that in Liverpool. There's a new hospital getting built, which is the Royal, and Tommy has been designing it for people with dementia. And when you go in, and if it's your loved one that's got dementia, it's up on the screen, and you do get this sticker, and you do get looked after, and I think it's a very good idea. And also, we have menus for people that can eat, that can swallow okay, where it's just pictures. So they pick out their food, and they don't put it on a plate. They put it in a little box, and it's working. And I think also we need more dementia nurses, and I think it's all to do with education, really. They get taught to be nurses and carers, but they don't really get taught to be dementia nurses. I think they get 20 minutes talk about dementia, and I think that's a good step, I think that's what we need. Thank you.
Just to say, I think that's fantastic that, Tommy, you were involved right at the beginning in the design of the hospital. And what often happens, as people know, is that you kind of come on a little bit later, it's all been done, and people say, oh, it's too expensive to change. So being there right at the beginning, that's a really fantastic example.
I completely agree. I think being involved at the beginning and actually making it meaningful for people that need to use the service or might need to use the service is absolutely the right thing to do. And I applaud both of you in terms of your comments and your real experience of what's needed. I know that in terms of education for nurses, I completely agree that we need to ensure that nurses and all carers that provide support in whatever service they are in need to be educated at the right level and to a significant degree. Health Education England, that are responsible for providing a lot of that education, are doing a sort of a staged approach so that depending on what roles people have, they are now getting access to more and more education. And they have also done some very specific work around specialist training for particularly people looking after older people that have got dementia, which I think will start to make a difference. But we really do need to make sure that we've got a workforce that is educated, that is competent, that can deliver the 6 Cs, but is right for the needs of the people that need our services. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that training is vitally important in enabling the workforce to be well developed. But I think the other lesson I've learned is that little things can be done just by people being given the space and permission to be a bit more human about what they're doing. And what I love is the film that some of you may have seen, Barbara's Story, that was done by St Thomas's Hospital as a training video for people in the hospital and is now available for anyone to use. What that reminds us is that it's everybody in the hospital that matters. So yes, the nurses are very important, but so is everybody else that you come into contact with. And often the people who have first contact aren't the nurses. And the example from Barbara's story is the porters who watched the film and thought, well, we can actually do something different. They didn't need management permission. They discovered that I think they pulled people facing backwards through the hospital who had dementia, who found it incredibly disorientating because you couldn't see where you were going. And they watched the film and thought, hey, this is really stupid. And they just decided to change it. And overnight, they introduced a new way of enabling and supporting patients with dementia coming into the hospital. So little things can make a big difference. And I think the John's campaign is about giving people permission to behave differently, to be different, to recognise the individual needs, to recognise that the staff, as I said earlier, are under pressure and need support. The only other thing I'd add, and we haven't talked about it today, but it's an important extension for me of John's campaign, is to always remember that when you have people visiting people in hospital, it may well be that the carer coming to visit their relative in hospital may be the person with dementia. And I think we've forgotten that. We've talked about the patient with dementia, but for every person with dementia who's got a family carer with them, that carer may themselves be the person in hospital. How do we make it possible for the person with dementia to come and be a visitor, to come and be a relative coming to see their friend in hospital? So I think that's an important extension of the work that John's campaign has started.
I'm a consultant geriatrician, so I work at the front line, and I can't miss the opportunity of the ear of Jane Cummings. And I want to pick up the point that the first
clinical director.
the first.
I know Owen too well.
Oh, okay.
The first question about how can we avoid this becoming tick box, and how can we give it the priority that it needs? So where I work, what matters are 4-hour waits, financial balance, and safety dashboards. And actually, to individualise care, you actually need to make one person's care different from the next person. And this isn't just dementia, it's end-of-life care as well. But how do we give it priority? How do we avoid it becoming just another tick box?
Well, you make a good point, and I have spent a lot of my career talking about doing things for the right reason and not a tick box exercise, and also not doing something which then ends up with unintended consequences. How do you make it real? I think it's about when you start thinking about what matters and what the impacts are in your wards and services that you work in. For me, there's something about a safety dashboard is not a safety dashboard unless it includes experience. And when I talk about experience, I mean both the patient experience, in this case, carers experience, and also the staff experience. And if you really mean, and your organisation really means what it says in terms, if it does, I'm assuming, say that it wants to provide the very best possible care, then actually concentrating on what matters to your patients and what matters to them, to their families and their carers is really important. And there are quite a lot of places now that will actually promote that. So as well as promoting how many people are seen in 4 hours, or seen, treated and discharged in 4 hours, or how many get their 18-week wait, and how many, what's your financial balance. Those are only important if you look at it in the round, which is one of the reasons why we really push the triple aim that I talked about with Leading Change, Adding Value, which is about doing 3 things, which is improving outcomes, improving experience, and also managing the money as best you can. So for me, it's about, yes, people like me as one of the national directors for NHS England and the chief nurse for England saying this is what matters, but it's also about you and your colleagues and the staff and your patients and the families that you look after, also being able to say this is what matters to us. And I often say to people, the really important question to ask is not what's the matter, it's what matters to you. And what matters to you and the response you get from staff, from patients, from the public and from carers in particular is the thing that should drive what we do and what you do.
I'm just going to add a quick comment. As I sip my champagne, as it were, I'm always thinking about what action do we do next, because I'm always thinking about how do we build on what we've got. And one thing which because I'm going to have to disappear, but you're going to be here later on, when Neil Churchill comes later on, and for Jane and Alistair as well, one thing that I think we don't do very well in the NHS is listen well enough to patients and carers. And the Friends and Family Test. you know, the friends and families test is a dipstick. It gives you a measure of the oil level, but that's about it. It doesn't really tell you any richness of experience. So we need some better ways, and it may not need to be a national one-size-fits-all, but we need better ways whereby every hospital is tasked to actually listen more closely and respond more effectively to what the patients and the carers are telling them, because we actually know what works and what doesn't work. We can see it, we can feel it. The problem we have with dementia is that people, and I'll use a sort of a strong word, but I think it's true, people with dementia and their family carers are basically knackered by the daily task of living with dementia. And what we're trying to do is say, even though you're knackered, even though you're worn out, it's important to campaign and it's important to make a difference, both for you and for people to come. And we need those practical things. So a bit more listening and a bit more hearing what our experience is, I think would make a big difference.
I'd support that. And just to add that Neil works in my team and absolutely is committed to doing exactly what Jeremy's just done. And the friends and family stuff is exactly a dipstick. But there is a lot more work that we're doing, and particularly around things like end-of-life care and what it means for people that approaching end of life and their carers. So there is work we're doing. We could probably do more, so any ideas would be gratefully received later.
I think we have time for one really brief question, and I'm being pointed over there. Brief answer.
Thank you. I'm Buzz Loveday. I'm a trainer in dementia care. I work a lot with different NHS trusts, and it's great to hear so much being said about the importance of education for NHS clinicians. One of the issues that so often faces staff in the NHS who I'm involved in training is a lack of protected learning time, and it's fantastic that there are so many important training initiatives around in enabling staff to be dementia aware and to communicate well with people who have dementia, but often so difficult for staff to be able to be released to attend the training that is available.
I think that's a very good point. A few years ago, we had an aspiration in the NHS that of the staff, and it includes social care, that 10% should be dementia expert, 50% dementia trained, but 100% dementia aware. And I think that goes into the point that Jeremy was making. I think it's a very good point about about having time, and I know that I speak to a lot of colleagues in primary care now, and they have specific called out protected learning times, and that's important. I guess a challenge that I'm often is said, we know that lifting and handling is mandatory. Why is not dementia awareness mandatory? I think that's a very good point. I was hoping to get a round of applause. Oh, fantastic. I've always wanted to say something on a panel that gets a round of applause. I'm always jealous of Jeremy that whatever he says, everyone laughs. So thank you very much. And Rowan, in terms of the question that you said, I know you run an exemplary service in Nottingham. I've been to see it, and I think it's a balance that you and your colleagues, obviously have every day between giving the best care and being mindful of the kind of standards and the things like the 4-hour wait. But I think everyone would agree, and I think Jane's written something down in terms of, and when Neil Churchill is here, I think that's a good opportunity. And certainly in dementia, that's something that we're aware is to have more feedback from people with dementia in their care.